When you first become president, one of the questions that people ask you is, what's really going on at Area 51? I think I just became the first president to ever publicly mention Area 51.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
I had people go look at the records on Area 51 to make sure there was no alien down there. I had all the Roswell papers reviewed, everything.
If you saw that there were aliens there, would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would?
I mean, if there's some huge national security thing and I can't get agreement to open them, I won't. But I do want to open them because I'm interested.
Do you believe?
I don't know. But there are enough stories out there that I don't think everybody is just sitting, in their kitchen making them up. I think that people see things. What they see, I don't know.
That certain morning, I happened to look over into the sky to the northeast, and I seen a very, very bright light up there, like a very bright star. And then I said, well, that's moving. And I just stood there and watched it as what it was doing, and it was just coming down out of the sky real slow, and no noise, just quiet, and I couldn't see no wings or nothing, just floating right through the midair up there. And I thought, well, if I don't tell nobody that I seen something go over town tonight, nobody...
Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us for the show. It is Sunday. I hope you guys have had an amazing week. We've got a great guest lined up on the show for you. We've got round 2 with Chris Cyrus. He's here to... I mentioned it to you guys last week. Chris came on the show and started talking about Dogman and sharing a ton of encounters, and we had some issues with the audio quality, and I didn't want to put that out there for you guys, so I had Chris go ahead and record the encounter stories that he did not get to share on last week's show. So Chris graciously recorded himself sharing these encounters for you guys and emailed it over to me. So this is what this show is going to be. This is going to be about 30 minutes or so of Chris sharing some pretty compelling Dogman encounters. So if you enjoyed round 1 with Chris, stick around for this. You guys are going to enjoy the encounter stories. So if you haven't already checked it out, check out the show that I just uploaded for this week with Paul Eno. Paul is an investigator who's got over 50 years experience in the paranormal. He worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren on some of their bigger cases. He's got some amazing stories that he's told over there. We've even thrown in a little bit of Bigfoot for you guys that are into that thing. So Chris is ready to go. I'm going to let the music play. You guys sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
The following are going to be several encounters that I have the privilege of sharing and showcasing to the audience tonight that feature Dogman. And a lot of these encounters are not horror suspense like many narrators put out there. These are actually very brief encounters, some of which I find to be very ABC. And something I've always commonly said is that once you've had one encounter that you heard of or seen one, you've heard them all and seen them all. So basically, I'm not going to continuously repeat. I could tell you 50 encounters, but I'm going to tell you some that have stood out to me that I find to be very interesting and I think would be beneficial for this episode. So without further ado, I'm going to start off with this first encounter. This first encounter happened in the Pine Barrens locate of New Jersey back in 2016. A gentleman that I also know personally, he had since moved away. He's now in Kansas, along with his associate, who also lives up in New Jersey, both of whom have had an encounter with a large bipedal wolf-like creature near the Wharton State Forest region back in November 2016. Now, just a little bit of brief information about the Pine Barrens real quick before we get into this experience. The Pine Barrens covers 1.1 million acres of land scattered all throughout the New Jersey area, beginning with Cape May, advancing all the way up until we reach the boot end between borderlines of Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New York. So you have a lot of land that constructively is filled with wildlife. So a lot of people, especially in the Pine area where a lot of Jersey Devil sightings reportedly have been spoken of, are very blunt and honest, and they say that they've seen things out there. There's satanic cults, there's animal mutilation, strange pentagram duels, mysterious paranormal experiences, and then, of course, cryptid encounters, which we're going to get into. So, right around the Wharton area, this gentleman, along with his buddy, had been camping for the time being, and they had heard a lot of rustling in the woods right around their perimeter, right behind them, to where they had went ahead and they wanted to start curiosity investigate because they weren't 100% too sure what it was. They proceed to go ahead and grab a lantern and a flashlight to grab enough generated light to move around this area. They also were attached with knives. They didn't have any guns on them, but they did have equipment on them that could protect them. When they were going towards northern, going farther away from their campsite, the rustling got a little closer, and they began to point out something that looked like a giant mass in the bushes. Once they took a closer look, about maybe 20 feet away, they noticed a giant creature that had yellow teeth and a little bit of blood coming from it, and a snout and eye shine, amber eye shine, looking right at them, 20 feet directly. This terrified both of them. They dropped the light, they took the lantern, and proceeded to run off, going south where their campsite was. They proceeded to get as much belongings as they could get into the car within under 2 minutes, and proceed to get into their truck, and drive off. They got out, and they didn't tell their report to anybody. This was an encounter that this individual shared with me after he had seen a sketch that I had saved on my computer of the LBL Beast that was originally done by Barton Nunnally. And that's how he opened up about his experience. In a follow-up to that, I reached out to him and said, hey, would you like to be open to going back and taking a look at this place with your honesty and open experience? And he agreed to it, but when we got to this perimeter, about maybe 10 to 15 minutes into it, I can already feel the vibes that he kind of felt. He was feeling very uncomfortable, very uneasy. Maybe it was his body language and his demeanor that was bringing that mood down, because we were with 3 to 4 other associates who were very proud hunters, as well as also outdoorsmen, very professional outdoorsmen. And even they said that, we need to get out of here. So unfortunately, he was not able to really accommodate, so that was enough in my mind to say that he saw something that really starstruck him and has changed his view sight on the outdoors, and in which it has. He's admitted that to me as well. He moved to Kansas thanks to a great job opportunity in the city, in Kansas City, and he was able to go ahead and kind of enjoy that city life. He's always been a city life individual. He's always enjoyed the city. So he's best to be outside in the city versus being outside in the woods, the great outdoors, or in general anywhere in southern New Jersey. So that was a very interesting experience, and my very first real encounter I collected, and it's really what kicked off my podcasting at the time and what would be the best way of approach towards this. This next report happened in northern Jersey by Sussex County, and for many people out there who might be affiliated or know a bit more about Sussex County, that's very notable Bigfoot land. So I've been kind of having a mixed reaction on it, between it being Bigfoot versus it being Dogman, but at the same time, I do keep an open mind. I go by the description, which makes me distinctively think it's a Dogman, so I will explain a little bit about this. So I won't give out the precise location, because this individual is a married man, and he has a respectful business around this area he doesn't want to get too much attention to, but what I will say is that in Sussex County, preferably in the southern region of Sussex County, this gentleman and his wife were leaving a party one night in 2009 when they were driving off of a long, narrow road that expanded upon 1.5 miles for the next light, when all of a sudden they had seen a black mass run across the road with half a deer behind its back and bloody and running across the road, while these individuals almost swerved. They were about maybe 30 feet away, 30 to 40 feet from how this individual best described. They got a good look at it because their lights had high beams on. It was attached. That night there were fog, so they had their beams on, so they were able to get a much more brighter look through the headlights. And what was revealed was this creature that was tall in size, around 7 to 8 feet tall, and had a very bulky chest, but had a snout, but no pointy ears, and it was just very large, and it had a snout and fangs, and then ran across the road, which they were getting a good glide. And then from the side view, they saw the eye shine. It was about amber-eyed. So also, too, I realized I had left out a very important detail of the first encounter. The description of the height, the fur, it was brown fur, and there was a little bit of gray on the top. I don't think I've really emphasized that as much on other podcasts. I discussed that report because I've never really touched base on descriptions in the past as much as I have done now. But a little bit of gray from when I last spoke to him, and then it stood about 7 to 8 feet tall, much no different in size than the one I'm talking about now. And the interesting thing about that second encounter was that this happened so quickly. It happened in under 10 seconds, and to the witnesses, they both said it felt like it was a minute because they had seen half the corpse of a deer, and it was running across the road alongside this dogman that they believe was this unknown abnormal animal with strange instinct. The third report I'd like to share comes from another region in southern New Jersey in the Cumberland County area, involving a bunch of campers back in 2013 who were camping alongside the region of Egg Harbor Township. No specific region. They basically, if you are a native of New Jersey, you will know that around that region there's so much woodland that it's impossible to kind of just like keep base. You can camp anywhere. You wouldn't even know if it was private property. So these individuals, they go out and they're camping around the area, Egg Harbor, and they heard some scruffle noises there and there throughout the course of the night. And throughout the course of this evening, they're sitting about and they hear snarls coming from the back, and they instantly think it's a bear. Around the native area, there's no real bears. There's often coyote reports. There have been minor black bear reports. But the snarls and the growling that they heard didn't sound like a bear. It sounded much deeper, and it sounded much fierce, like as if this, whatever it was, did not want them there. Around 2 a.m., everyone's asleep, but then they hear scratching coming from a tree. They hear bark being clawed up. And then they hear howling coming from a far distance. So they were completely freaked out by this experience, and around when dawn first hit, around 6, they decided to say screw it and proceeded to go ahead and pack up and get out. And they recall one of the gentlemen claims that they had seen something watching them from a far distance, and they just wanted to proceed to move out when they were getting on their bikes to leave. That was a very interesting report because you hear many cases of Bigfoot encounters. People who are camping, they hear Bigfoot, they hear what believe to be Bigfoot when it comes near a campsite, investigating it. It's curious of its surroundings, but also, too, are looking for potential threats that could be a hazard to their territory, or that this creature is being invaded upon its territory and doesn't want anybody there present, period. I would say that this was a similar matter, but I feel that this dogman was trying to lure them out, also too, to scare them. We often hear fear and fright is a big factor in a lot of these cases we hear of with the dogman creature. But overall, I thought it was a very interesting experience. And there's one other encounter I like to read about camp-wise. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But very, very interesting report. And the best part about it is that the odors that they smelt like dried food, like urine as well. So it really stood out to them, especially considering that it was such a brief thing. But even one of the campers said that they've always camped around that site and they've never heard anything like it before. So they probably wondered if it was something that was passing by, because they returned to the site about maybe a few years later and they didn't hear anything. So maybe it was a transitionary period for a potential dogman. The one who had seen what appeared to be a dogman, they only think it was a dogman because of the fact of the howling, the claw marks, and also because of the way that they've seen the one person saw it. It looked like it was just a weird looking giant wolf standing up on its hind legs, And there's been some reports of people saying that they've heard of Dogman being sighted with just standing on its hind legs and it looking like a wolf, like a regular timber wolf. And then another fourth encounter that happened, this occurred in Pennsylvania, and this happened in one of the northern forests. And a gentleman who is a devoted Christian had been with his brother just going on a hike, and this Christian man was traveling alongside, and he had noticed that there's something he had seen across the river about 50 yards away. It was black and looking at him, and he knew it wasn't a human because, for one, he saw what appeared to be white patches of fur coming from the chest area. So he instantly thought it was an animal. And then also because of the shape of the head, which was described as a German shepherd's head, he got out and he looked and he noticed, along with his brother, this strange thing, and they had just a stare down for about maybe a minute. And he swears it felt like it was longer, like the second encounter, the couple that were seeing the creature across the road. But he swears it was longer. But he had looked at this thing, and this thing looked at him, and they just locked heads. And he had said a minor prayer, and just so that he wasn't invading his territory, and he just continued on, and there was nothing more to it. He described also too the environment was very quiet, like there was no one around the area. And he assumed that there was just probably just very little activity. And ultimately, maybe it was that this thing is a reason for that. But a very brief encounter. But the guy, why I bring up his religious ethic is that a lot of people who've often are religious try to classify Dogmen as demons or classify them as something evil. I disagree strongly because I don't think that they are evil. I just think that, people think that they're evil because they listen to shows that promote religious views on it. And it unfortunately makes those who are Christians crazy. So this gentleman, who is a Christian man, didn't think it was evil, just thought it was just an abnormal creature, and carried off into the sunset along with his brother and didn't think too much of it. The other encounters I can share with you, there were 3 specific sets of pieces that I found to be pretty interesting. 2 of these experiences happened in a national park that's growing rapidly with Bigfoot and Dogman encounters. And then you got another in the UK. And then you have another one in Colorado I can share that occurred. And they all have very interesting set pieces to it. So the first 2 reports come from Ocala National Forest, and this was in between 2013 and 2018. Ocala National Forest in Florida has had a series of array of encounters of Bigfoot and Dogman respectively. You've had investigators swear upon TV crews that they're not leaving the site unless they find a Bigfoot or Bigfoot evidence. This has been proven by various articles. If you look up Ocala National Park Bigfoot, you will find it. These 2 reports come from 2 separate incidents happening 5 years apart. The first happened in 2013 with a young couple who were going on a hike, and they had noticed something large and bulky with pointy ears about 150 feet away from them ahead, and it was just walking the trail. It's like it got in sync with the trail when this thing was walking, and then the couple, they stopped, and the guy decided to turn back the other way because he didn't want to follow this thing in hopes that this thing would probably come after him if it thought that it was going to, like stalking, in which it could possible. Anybody who's out in the woods would think that a predator, if you're close to it and if it knows you're there, it'll know you're there, but if you're approaching it or coming by it knows that you want problems. That's just common sense 101. But when they were leaving, they had noticed that there wasn't a lot of activity, much similar to the Christian encounter. Nobody around that area, but they had just seen a lot of torn down trees and claw marks and whatnot, things that they missed out upon. The height, they described it as 7 to 8 feet tall, a bulky build to it with pointy ears in the snout. And this other encounter 5 years later happened with a gentleman who was ATVing along with his cousins in a thicker line of trail in the woods of Ocala. And they had came across this creature that was in the far distance watching them. They didn't think too much of it, but they decided to disregard because they thought it was just, people playing a joke. Because it's a large park, and of course ATVing and whatnot, dirt biking. Well, I don't know how it is now, but I know that people, they'll tell the park rangers that there are people doing it, and they can get fined for it. So they probably thought it was just somebody trying to scare them, but it wasn't until they went to a specific part of the park and they kind of were invading an area is when they noticed that this thing was just following them. They had went about maybe 2.5 miles into this forest, and they went the opposite direction prior to their area where they were at, where they saw this thing on a hill. Now the same creature was following them through another part of trail within under 10 minutes, which freaked them out completely. So this time they decided to kind of play a game with it and decided to go all opposite ends, like different parts of the park, and trying to lose the sight of it, but regroup towards one of the smaller areas in Legion of Park, where there's like a small entrance going towards a small suburb. And they almost didn't do the problem with this incident is that when they did this, they went different directions, which could have caused a series of events. They could have caused anybody who was in certain camp areas, hikers, anything hurt. They were going on trails doing this with their ATVs, and they were that spooked by it. They got back, they all regrouped, but 2 of them claimed to have seen it, and one of them claimed that it chased after them, that it tried to provoke it and whatnot, that this thing followed it from one side of the trail to the mix. It traveled 2 miles going south, and then this thing followed it completely. And they were so spooked by it. What I would think in all of those cases is that this creature, they know that there's a difference between noise censorship and trying to get people to leave you alone. I personally think that in all those cases that these people unintentionally were just invading its territory, and it reacted the way it normally is immune to doing, and that's why it did what it did. Is it evil because it did that? No. When it walked on the trail with the couple who were about 150 feet behind it, it was kind of just passing by, but they didn't want to pursue in the event if this thing was testing them, that hey, it's my territory, but you're in it, and I'll attack you if you are still here. And then there was another minor report involving a fisherman who had seen a creature standing upright, around 8 to 9 feet tall, watching him from one of the beaches in Ocala, in which it went ahead and just watched him from a small distance far away and went back into the woodline about maybe 5 minutes later. So that's the kind of the rap sheet of Ocala right there. A very good display of reports, encounters that directly were just completely overlapped with fear and terror for those who've seen it. Even minor reports like that, there's adrenaline rushing when you see something that you've never seen before. Because you don't know what the hell it is, and you're trying to make sense of it, even with bears. So now these next few reports, these are a little different. These reports now, we're going into different states. There's one that happened in Georgia I'll talk about briefly. This happened to a woman who had been traveling alongside a trail one day with her dog, and she picked up teeth. She didn't know what the teeth were. She's also seen Dogman prior, but she picked up these teeth and took them home with her, but the teeth that she picked up were Dogman teeth, reportedly, because she felt an unnecessary presence following her when she was leaving, and she felt that she was being watched, which freaked her out completely. Lo and behold, when she got home around nighttime, I'd give or take, it was very early, maybe 8 or 9 in the before really early evening, and she had put her kid to bed, and she goes to her room, and then she hears claw scratching by the door or by the window, and she investigates and she sees this creature with red eyeshine, pointy ears, very tall, looking outside her window, stalking her, basically looking at her, observing her, and trying to get sense of her. And she is so freaked out, she starts breaking down, and she messaged me on Messenger, and she told me this whole ordeal, what happened. And I told her to calm down, I told her to relax, I told her to pray, I told her to reason with this thing and try to make sense of it. And when I asked her about the teeth, that she kept the teeth, that's when I said, this thing wants its family back. It wants something that you've taken away from it. So the following morning, nothing happened later. Everything afterwards, my advice seemed to calm down. But the following morning, I advised her to return the teeth, in which she did. She claims that she was stalked. She claims that like she had seen something there. But for the time being, though, it was a very terrifying experience for her because it distinguished her biggest fear of what she's trying to avoid. And I don't think she's done it ever since. Another report happened in Colorado involving a gentleman on a farm where his father, who has recently since passed, owned a ranch, a widowed father, and the son was divorced. The son was living there for a brief period of time while he was getting his life straightened out. And in the time being, he helped us out on the ranch. He was helping with, the cattle, the chickens and whatnot. And he'd been hearing some strange noises for a little bit, howling and whatnot, there and there. This weird howling got to a point where he was so spooked in what he was looking at that he asked his dad one night, and his dad just kind of played it off as if it was nothing. And then one night he heard the noises getting closer, in which he was getting spooked because now he felt this, whatever it was getting closer to the house. He got his dad's shotgun and proceeded to get a bottle of Jack and go out there and try to see if maybe, he can find this thing while still trying to get that fear away from him. And going out there, he looked around the perimeter for a bit, didn't see nothing with his light, and then next thing you know, he noticed something coming from the wood line. And the wood line, this thing was coming closer to him. So what was becoming 300 feet away was now becoming 200 feet away, 100 feet away. And it was getting closer and closer with this amber eye shine until he said, "Halt, this is my property, and you will leave me alone. You will leave my farmland alone, my livestock alone, and you will leave everything, my family alone." And this thing just looked at him while he slowly went back into the house. Did not have his shotgun raised at this creature, but slowly went back into the house and left it alone. To where the following morning, he tried to look around to see if maybe he'd find some prints, in which he didn't. But it was still enough to say, draw this creature out and run away. So that was a very interesting case, and something that really stood out to me especially. This next report, this is one I'd love to share, save the best for last. This happened in South Yorkshire, UK. A woman by the name of Courtney, her and her family, for a long period of time, had sustained a series of weird occurrences on their property, going as far back as December of 2017, when right by her front door, the wall, this plaque that's by her house, had light bulbs installed to it, which served as a light. And these light bulbs were getting unscrewed, and then the light bulbs were not only just getting unscrewed, but they were getting now taken out of the socket and getting smashed, to where Courtney decided to just kind of watch it for a few nights and see what happened. Nothing would make sense of it. A little while goes by, maybe about a week later, and then into 2018, something was on top of her roof. They live in a 2-story house, so something erupted on her roof and ripped apart the tile and was knocking tiles down on the floor. And then, to top it all off, something ripped apart the bottom of her van's bumper, which caused it to rip apart completely, keeping it unhinged from the roof. It was just a complete disarrayed mess, and it was just god-awful. And the police were called. They tried to make sense of it as an animal attack, and they had no answers. So it was kind of like left in the dark, like, something obviously was trying to get their attention. At that point, I agreed, she agreed, her husband agreed to go ahead and get surveillance cameras. They installed all around the property. Now, Courtney would work at home. She would work at home during the day, and her husband would work during the week, while the kids would be either with her or at her grandmother's. And then where they lived in this village in South Yorkshire, where everyone kind of knew each other, and everyone has there's a group on Facebook dedicated to it, like the Neighborhood Watch, like Neighborhood Alert and whatnot. So they installed cameras, they were out there, and a little bit of time went by, and she fell asleep one night, and she noticed that there was something on her surveillance cameras right behind her caravan in the backyard. And at certain times, there would be a pick in the audio, and then audio would be quiet for about maybe a minute or two when she was replaying all this through her phone. And I took a few shots of it. I took a couple screen caps of what she saw, and it looked like it was a creature with a dog's head, and it was looking right at her property. And whatever it was definitely was curious of her property, and that this thing was there for a particular reason. Long story short, she basically was freaked out about it, which I understood completely. I advised her to do a bit of gifting, leaving food out, leaving some things out. Maybe this creature would just take the food. I also asked for a background check on her property, which we came to find out that the property had about a butcher that used to own it. So this butcher was killing livestock on his property, but there was nothing more to it, which classified it down under as possible Indian burial ground or perhaps sacred. A little while went by further, and then there was a little stone wall different from the wall by her front house that was getting pecked at, and Courtney did not like that, which resulted in me kind of being curious to why it was doing that. And then one night, this creature took a big chunk out and threw it across the window and caused the entire thing to smash and completely be dismembered. This is when Courtney had enough, and she was at wit's end. She left the house for a little bit along with her family and went to her mother's house to stay safe, far from away from this household. And that's when I called in 2 other researchers to kind of help out. And what we discovered was this Dogman was on a property that had a lot of mess around of it, that was all around this village, stalking it. We determined 2 things. The behavioral instinct came in of when this Dogman made action when she was going through menstruational cycles, which we assumed maybe this Dogman was a female and responded to that negatively in a very negative manner, which resulted in these Dogmen coming to the property and doing what it was doing. We assumed too that this creature chose this place because of its environment, the food sources. There were a lot of cases of missing animals, cats, dogs, and horses, and also too because of other people who could be going through a similar situation. So we also discovered too that this creature was coming through a certain sewage line or a certain wood line that cut out far a little out the outskirts, which caused it to manifest itself a bit more, which caused this whole thing to create chaos throughout the course of the night. I unfortunately lost contact with Courtney following that report, so I do not have any updates. I hope that if she is out there, she knows of the South Yorkshire case, that you will please reach out to me, because very interesting encounter, and there's so much more to it. In the last 2 years, there's definitely more to it. But these are my encounters. Thank you.
And that's it for tonight's show, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.